We're going to go to the next story here because when I tell you it seems like a lot of things are happening at once, wait till you hear this story. So you have Israel and Gaza, you have Russia and Ukraine, and now President Xi Jinping is actually giving a very stern warning to Joe Biden in reference to Taiwan. Before we get into this story, don't forget to smash that like button, guys. Thank you so much. That helps me out with the algo. And we're going to go ahead and dive into this story coming out of China, a stern warning for Joe Biden.
NBC News is reporting exclusively today about a blunt message delivered by China's President Xi Jinping to President Biden when the two leaders had their summit in San Francisco last month. Joining us now is the leader of the NBC team reporting on all of this. Meet the press moderator, Kristen Welker. Kristen, there were a lot of things that the team, our national security team, Carol Lee, Courtney Kuby, you.
And you.
Well, this team found out really what was being said in this candid conversation that was described by the White House and the State Department in San Francisco last month.
Absolutely. This was a blunt but candid conversation, not confrontational, but we are told by three sources, current and former officials who are familiar with this conversation, that President Xi said to President Biden that he does intend to reunify Taiwan and that he has not chosen a timeline to do that yet. He was also apparently complaining about the elections in Taiwan. And prior to this meeting, Chinese officials had asked that President Biden issue a statement supporting Chinese reunification, something that, of course, the president and the White House did not do. We've just gotten fresh, exclusive reaction from Senator Lindsey Graham to this reporting. I'm going to read you what he says. He called.
Before we get into Lindsey Graham, heads up, guys. President Xi Jinping has told Joe Biden that he plans to reunify Taiwan with China. Now, I want to remind you again, according to the One China policy, Taiwan was already a part of China. So when there were these comments from people like Pelosi, who actually went to visit Taiwan, again, trying to escalate things with China, in my opinion, she was trying to like poke the bear. She makes these statements that, well, we're going to do everything that we can to protect Taiwan's independence and that China better not try to invade Taiwan. Well, how are you going to invade something that already belongs to you? That was the part to me, you know, we got to push back on some of the rhetoric, the vocabulary that's being used when people say that he's going to try to invade Taiwan. How can you invade something that is already a part of you? Again, according to the One China policy. Now, listen to what Lindsey Graham said. Mr. Warhawk himself.
The story as reported beyond unnerving. He goes on to say, quote, I will be working with Democratic and Republican senators to do two things quickly. First, create a robust defense supplemental for Taiwan. And second, draft pre-invasion sanctions from hell to impose on China if they take action to seize Taiwan. I believe there is strong bipartisan support to stand up to Chinese communist aggression. So that is how Senator Lindsey Graham is responding. Again, we are just starting to get this response coming in. Andrea, though, taking a step back, the big picture here. Look, this is consistent with the messaging that President Xi has conveyed for years as it relates to Taiwan. What is significant, though, is the setting in which he delivered this message, the fact that he said it directly to President Biden, the fact that this took place at a meeting that was really intended to lower the temperature between these two leaders and between these two countries in the wake of the Chinese spy balloon incident last year. So it was a moment that caused officials to take note in the room. What does it mean? What, if any, timeline is he looking at? All of that remains to be seen, Andrea, but it certainly does raise fresh concerns and aggression.
First of all, it was a weather balloon. Notice how they're still calling it a spy balloon. Again, that's on purpose, trying to create fear among the American people that China is this big, scary, bad guy. Now, there are criticisms to be had about China. There are criticisms to be had about Xi Jinping. However, a lot of the criticism that has been exploited in the mainstream media has been proven wrong, and they continue to lie. Now, this is basically a chess move from Xi Jinping because he's looking at it like this. Have not met Xi. But if I were him, I'd think this way. Joe Biden seems to be in a little bit of trouble. Poll numbers are really down. Has the U.S. government involved in a proxy war with Ukraine? Sending arms to Israel when a lot of people in the world, including majority of Democrats, want a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, and do not agree with what Israel is doing to Gaza. Saudi Arabia has decided to come along with us and be a part of BRICS, and they're hanging out with me and they're hanging out with Russia too. Maybe it might be time to just put one more nail in the coffin. Let me call up Biden and let him know, hey, just to let you know, I'm going to reunify Taiwan with China. Kick him while he's down. The United States government cannot afford to go to war with China. Lindsey Graham is out of his mind. Do people understand? He's out of his mind. To sit here and say, I can get bipartisan support to push back against China. I'm sure he can, but we cannot go to war against China, period. These people are crazy. This guy hasn't even made it to the second term. We are already involved in 2 international conflicts, possibly a third, if they get involved with this conflict with China. So this is what I want you to see. One of the things they talked about was how the reunification could influence Taiwan's upcoming election. What angers me about these shows, particularly Meet the Press, NBC, etc., they only bring on the side that fits their narrative. You need to hear from other people that are on the other side and hear why they have this way. Like, these are mainstream media networks, right? They can't get an interview with Xi Jinping. I bet they could. I bet they really could. But listen to this in reference to the upcoming elections in Taiwan.
So, Kristen, it sounds like that was not about all that was discussed about this. What more do you know about what the administration's reaction has been, policymakers' reaction? I mean, this happened a little while ago. What's going on behind the scenes since then?
Well, so we know that President Xi was very blunt. He was candid. He was not confrontational. And he basically said that he plans to reunify, that China plans to reunify Taiwan with the mainland. Look, this fits into what he has consistently said publicly, but Garrett, it lands differently when he is speaking directly to the president and against the backdrop of these tensions between the U.S. and China in the wake of that spy balloon incident. The whole purpose of this meeting was to try to bring down the temperature on what were mounting tensions. We are getting...
I just have to keep correcting weather balloon. Thank you.
Getting some reaction. The White House not responding, but Senator Lindsey Graham saying this: I will be working with Democratic and Republican senators to do 2 things quickly. First, create a robust defense supplemental for Taiwan. And second, draft pre-invasion sanctions from hell to impose on China if they take action to seize Taiwan. I believe there is strong bipartisan support to stand up to Chinese communist aggression. When you listen to what President Biden said there after the meeting, kind of reiterated the U.S. position as it relates to China and Taiwan. But of course, we know that this president has been asked about this, and he has said that, yes, he would be prepared to use the U.S. military if China were to make a move to try to take Taiwan. The White House has walked those comments back, as you know. But again, this was a comment, Garrett, that really that was noticed by officials in the room because of this fraught backdrop against which President Xi made that statement.
When I listened to this reporting with my congressional reporter hat on, I was thinking about the sanctions in the context of the Russia-Ukraine war, too, where sanctions had not been as effective as everybody in Washington thought they would be at changing Putin's calculus. I wonder if it would be different with Xi. But I also wonder about this meeting in particular, because as you pointed out, this is all about lowering the temperature. And
lowering the temperature. So they want to put sanctions on China. He's talking about putting sanctions on China. Because this is what the U.S. government does. We just go around putting sanctions on all these different countries across the world.
The other big takeaway from this was that they were going to reestablish military-to-military communications, which also seems not to have happened. So how is the administration, how should we evaluate the success of that meeting based on your reporting and what we already know?
I think the big success of that meeting was that it happened at all because the two leaders hadn't met in a year. They did agree to reestablish military-to-military communications. As you rightfully point out, that has not happened yet. They also reached an agreement to try to tackle the issue of fentanyl. And remember, President Biden said trust but verify. So the United States very much in a posture of looking at China with skepticism as it relates to some of those commitments. But again, Garrett, what's significant is that these two leaders got into the same room and talked and tried to reach an agreement on some of these really
always
issues.
Rather have them talking than not talking.
That's right.
Kristen Welker, excellent
Thanks,
reporting. I want to
Garrett.
turn to Bonnie Lin for some analysis here. So what's your reaction to this ominous warning by President Xi, the fact that they are having this conversation face-to-face in the same room about reuniting Taiwan with mainland China?
Well, thank you, Garrett. And it's also always great to be with Kristen, too. So in terms of Xi's warning, I don't think that's anything new. I don't view it as more ominous than before. We've known for some time that China has been investing in its capabilities to be able to take the island by force if needed. I do think it's important to think about the larger context in which Xi is providing that warning. The first I will point out is China is very worried about the upcoming Taiwan elections, as Kristen pointed out. And from their perspective, the current DPP presidential candidate and his running mate are viewed from China as more problematic than the current DPP president. So part of Xi's comments was signaling to the United States that we're very worried about the election and we have deep distrust of one of the political candidates. And I think two other layers on that. One is also from the Chinese perspective, they believe that the United States can intervene and shape the election, right?
So that's where the worry comes in from China, is that they feel that the U.S. government would find a way to intervene with the election in Taiwan and put in a leader that they want. Wouldn't surprise me. They have done this before. Now, I want you to hear a different perspective, because we're used to hearing about, actually, we'll go to that later. Yeah, we'll go to this one next. I want to show you something else, because I don't want you to think that the U.S. fear-mongering and tension with China is just because of Taiwan. The U.S. government, regardless if the president has been Republican or if the president has been Democrat, the U.S. government has been heavily pushing back against China for years. A lot of that has to do with economic reasons and also technology. I want to show you something. The U.S. is losing the tech war with China. Listen to this. Get ready for it, folks. It is what it is. We just got to be honest here.
I will just share with you a few points here. One is that as a scholar who focuses on the Chinese model of development, I always say China has indeed succeeded in building socialism.
You see that part right there? China has indeed succeeded in building socialism. Remember, the U.S. government does not like that. They feel that if you build some type of socialism, that it could spread, and then that will threaten capitalism. So keep that in mind. We have to go back to the war in Vietnam, right? Remember the McCarthy hearings. Remember those issues around communism, this fear of socialism and things like that. They don't want that to spread because it threatens capitalism. But there's more.
For one thing, China is the largest economy since 2014 by purchasing power parity. So it's already 9 years into this status. And China produced the world's largest middle class, 400 million people, real middle class. When they go to America, they're also middle class. So larger than the US population.
Let's pause about the middle class part. China producing the largest middle class. At one point or another, we had a large middle class in the United States, but over the years that has continued to shrink because of the top 0.01% exploiting so many people at the bottom. More people are going into the working class category. More people are going into poverty. People have been slipping down. Instead of rising, people have been sinking.
China is at the forefront of the new industrial revolution. I just got this Huawei Mate 60 yesterday. I know it's better than Apple, the iPhone, yeah. And which means already China is different. What's more important is, as we all know, this world order is grossly unfair and unjust. What people call, and many scholars describe as dependency, as a peripheral central relationship. And China is perhaps the first large economy developing country that has broken through this dependency. In other words, China itself has become a center. I put this way, it's simultaneously the largest trading partner.
China has become a center. China is not dependent on the United States. They're a large economy that is not depending on the West. If anything, we still depend on them. So if they want to go ahead and put sanctions on China, that's also going to hurt people here in the United States because we still get goods and products from China. We don't have a lot of products in this country that are made in America, even in 2023. And they continue to talk about manufacturing is coming back, yada, yada, yada. Okay, cool, good. But are we still making the majority of our products here in this country? No. So we are far behind. And I've been talking about this before in reference to technology. What is being developed in China compared to technology here in the United States? Yes, we have Silicon Valley. But even when you compare it to Silicon Valley, they are light years ahead of us, man. Ahead of us.
Investment partner and the technology partner with the periphery, with developing countries, and with the West, if they prefer, where capability is there. Yeah, of course, they are having their own problems to sort out. So this capacity means a lot. The world is no longer same. For instance, if you look at the US monetary policy so far, in the past, with this kind of printing US dollars, many countries will run into financial crisis and go bankrupt. But this time, technically, only a small country called Sri Lanka was completely broken. But other developing countries also experienced tremendous difficulties, but not yet completely broken. Countries like Argentina, like Brazil, in tremendous difficulty, but now they trade with China. Yeah, they borrow Chinese currency or Chinese dollars, whatever. So this means a lot changes in this new world with the rise of China. And concerning the Chinese model, we have to mention, as some of you already mentioned, Chairman Mao and Chairman Deng Xiaoping. Mao's role in political liberation of the Chinese people, in engaging so many social revolutions, land reform, women's liberation, basic education, basic medical system for all Chinese. So this kind of social structure has been laid by Chairman Mao.
You hear that part right there? The healthcare, the education.
Yet it's also true that by the time when Deng Xiaoping came to power, China was a very poor country by per capita GDP. It's lower, or far lower than most African countries. Yet with 4 decades of reform and opening up, indeed, China succeeded in what we call learning from outside world, engage with globalization, but in a critical way. That's very important. As Deng Xiaoping said, we have to be selective. Otherwise, we embrace economic liberalization, but not political liberalization. Even within economic liberalization, we're also selective. As a result, China is one of the few that has indeed outperformed others in globalization. Now with BRI, China is actually trying to shape a new type of globalization. The older type is based on neoliberalism. It's based on more or less zero-sum game. The West win, others lose. Now, BRI is basically based on this philosophy of discussing together, building together, benefiting together. This new type of globalization. it's gaining momentum. Now over 150 countries have joined this, what we call the Modest Initiative. It's really changing the surface of the world. And behind.
So I'll stop it there. You can watch the rest of that. It's a longer discussion. You can watch the rest of this video. Why the U.S. is losing the tech war with China. That's on Thinkers Forum there. But I want to show you something else as well, because it's not just about tech. It's also about the banks. So if I actually show you the top 50 banks in the world, we're just going to look at the top 10. Obviously, I know you guys don't want to see 50 banks, obviously. Let's look at the top 10 banks in the world. Okay? Not necessarily largest, the top. Current rank is the first column. Previous rank is the second column. We're going to look at the current rank. Number 1, the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China Limited. Number 1, China. Number 2, China Construction Bank Corporation. Number 2, China. Number 3, Agricultural Bank of China Limited. That's number 3, China. The top 3 are China. Number 4, Bank of China Limited. Top 4 are China. You don't see an American bank until we get to number 5, which is JP Morgan Chase Bank National Association. Number 6, BNP Paribas SA. Number 7, China Development Bank. Number 8, Bank of America National Association. Number 9, MUFG Bank Ltd. And number 10, Credit Agricole SA. The point that I'm trying to make, folks, is this. The top 4 banks in the world are in China. And this was not always the case. This has evolved over time. JP Morgan used to be higher on that list. So that's another reason why the U.S. has this beef with China. Now, Xi Jinping, there's been a lot of things that have been said about him, but I do want to show you this conversation here, because Joe Biden actually made the statement during an interview, and he said he referred to Xi Jinping as a dictator. Well, there is a woman from Iowa who actually is friends with Xi Jinping and has been friends with him for 25 years. I want you to hear how she describes him. Sometimes it's important to hear the other side.
In San Francisco, a carefully choreographed reset of the rocky U.S.-China relationship. U.S. President Joe Biden, Chinese President Xi Jinping, a meeting months in the making, 4 hours of talks, meticulously planned photo ops, all seemingly going according to plan, until President Biden seemed to go off script.
Mr. President, after today, would you still refer to President Xi as a dictator? This is a term that you used earlier this year.
Well, look, he is. I mean, he's a dictator in the sense that he is a guy who runs a country that is a communist country that is based on a form of government totally different than ours.
Biden's off-the-cuff answer to a question from White House correspondent MJ Lee, drawing a cringe-worthy reaction from U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and a swift, sharp response from China's foreign ministry.
This is extremely erroneous. It is an irresponsible political maneuver which China firmly opposes.
Beijing had a similar reply back in June, when Biden called his Chinese counterpart a dictator at a California fundraiser. On the streets of Beijing, this man seems to agree with Biden's description.
One-party system, to be honest and open, that is a dictatorship.
Something he says keeps China stable, putting a positive spin on Biden's definition of the word. Beijing's communist rulers have long argued stability makes their system superior to Western democracies. They never, ever use the word dictator. Neither does Chinese state media, ignoring Biden's controversial comment, even as it made headlines around the world, instead focusing on President Xi's personal diplomacy with the U.S. president, like the moment they compared armored limousines.
It's like that Cadillac we have over there. They call it the Beast.
On China's heavily censored social media, not a single mention of the outrage over Biden using the D word for the second time in 6 months. The Chinese government takes that word very personally, blasting Germany's foreign minister for similar comments in September.
What sign would that be for other dictators in the world, like Xi.
He wouldn't be the first to fend off that label. Listen to this exchange on 60 Minutes between Mike Wallace and Xi's predecessor, Jiang Zemin.
You are the last major communist dictatorship in the world.
You mean I'm dictatorship?
Am I wrong?
Of course. This is big mistake.
Let's move forward to the friend here. Sorry, I just wanted to fast forward because to get through all that. So obviously he called him a dictator. Listen to what his friend from Iowa said. She's been friends with him for 25 years.
And she had a green bean casserole with Xi Jinping. Now, Xi at the time was 31 years old. He was a rising political star in the Communist Party, and he went to Iowa to see how Americans farmed. Landy was the head of a volunteer organization called Sister States, which had been just founded that year to connect Iowans to the rest of the world. And after that meeting, Landy made several trips to China over the years. She came back to visit Landy again. That was in 2012. We got a picture of them together right after he became president of China. And they were together again last night and had a private meeting. So Sarah Landy joins me now. And Sarah, I mean, I think it is incredible for anyone watching, and you try to look at someone of such consequence in the world with so much power, that you would know someone like this over so many years, so well. 40 years nearly, you have known him. How do you square words like dictator with the man that you have come to know through your lifetime?
Well, one thing is, I think it's too bad that one word throws people off. You know, I think, in China, there is one person that makes most of the decisions. It's Xi Jinping. I don't know that I'd call him a dictator, but he definitely is in charge. That's how they keep order there. But I think many other things we should focus on besides somebody calling a dictator. I don't know, how do you define a dictator? He believes he needs to keep control over lots of his people in order to keep the peace and security and bring them up as equal. It's not the way we believe in the United States. I don't know what you call it, but you wouldn't call it free reign democracy because he does not believe that's the best for his country. So other than squibbling over the name dictator, let's look at what they did talk about. Let's talk about what they did decide.
Notice, see what she does. This is why I thought what she said here was really good. She said, why are we focusing on this title of dictator? And let's focus on what they did actually discuss, because that's something that mainstream media will do, right? To get you to see their narrative or agree with their narrative. They will sit up there and have you focus on terms and labels, things like that, so that you're not focused on the actual meat part of the conversation, the actual substance, and to distract you, honestly.
Maybe to have more airlines going back and forth, maybe more people-to-people exchanges, having teams look into fentanyl and all the other things they're going. So I think there are lots of other ways we should look into this conversation rather than being mad that somebody's called someone a dictator. Calling names doesn't work, but it doesn't tell the story.
And that was the end of the bit there. But again, that was an American woman from Iowa. She has been friends with him for over 25 years. And she does not see him the way that mainstream media, at least in the United States, sees him. Sometimes it's good to hear these other sides, right? I'm gonna go to some of the comments here. 007, thank you. I bet Biden asked Ping for duck and soy sauce. You know what? He probably would ask him. He probably would do something like that. Dr. Nick says, forefront, Sabby, Ukraine, Gaza, Africa, and China. That's right. Also Africa. Thank you, Dijon. Folks aren't silly. We know those donor groups are paying these so-called celebrities and politicians to spew out their political ideas. Yes. Yes. And thank you, 007. Sanctions, ? BRICS goes into effect in January. LOL. Thank you for this as well, Dijon. Shabby, you're the best. Thank you. And thank you, 007. Trickle down economic equal piss on your head. Call it rain.